There is a sugar that doesn't just make things sweet, but actually helps your body. A sugar that can help control your blood sugar instead of spiking it. A food that was the most important source of nutrition for entire civilizations for thousands of years. It grows on a tree that asks for almost no water. A tree that makes its own fertilizer. A tree that could be the key to feeding us in a hotter, drier world. And yet, this ancient superfood was erased. Not because it was bad for us, but because it was too good. It didn't fit into the new world of big farms and processed foods. Its story was forgotten, and its power was ignored. Today, we are going to uncover the story of this healing sugar and why it was hidden from all of us. During my years as a plant scientist, I learned that the most powerful foods are often the ones we have forgotten. They are the plants that have been nourishing people for centuries, long before our modern food system came along. These plants hold secrets to health and resilience that we desperately need today. And the story of mesquite is one of the most important stories I have ever come across. The story of this healing sugar begins in the deserts of North America. For thousands of years, the indigenous peoples of the Sonoran, Chihuahuan, and Mojave deserts relied on the mesquite tree for their survival. This was not just a snack or a minor part of their diet. For many tribes, like the Tohono O'odham and the Pima, mesquite was the most important food they had. It was more important than corn. It was their bread, their sugar, and their source of life. The Tohono O'odham people have a calendar based on the moons, and one of those moons is called the mesquite bean harvest moon. That is how central this tree was to their lives. Before the arrival of Europeans, before trading posts and forced changes to their way of life, these communities lived on mostly wild foods. And mesquite was the king of those foods. I've read accounts from the 1800s from a government agent named Frederick Grossman. He was stationed at the Gila River Indian Reservation in Arizona. He wrote that the Acamel O'odham and Paiposh people there gathered millions of pounds of mesquite pods every single year. Millions of pounds. They would store these pods in giant baskets on the roofs of their homes, sealed with mud. Some of these baskets could hold enough mesquite to feed a family of 6 for an entire year. This was their food security. This was their wealth. They would grind the dried pods into a fine, sweet flour. This flour was incredibly versatile. They made dense, cake-like breads from it. They made pancakes and dumplings. They mixed it with water to make a thick, nourishing drink called atole. They even let it ferment to make a kind of beer. The flour could be packed into hard cakes, which they called mesquite turtles. And these cakes would last for years without spoiling. When they needed food, they would just break off a piece and add water. It was the perfect survival food, given to them by the desert itself. I had the honor of speaking with Clifford Pablo, a tribal elder from the Tohono O'odham Nation. He told me, "Our people have been using mesquite for a long time, for shade, for housing, for fencing, the leaves for different medicines, and the pods. Everybody has been using that for a long time, eating it and staying healthy." This was not just a food. It was the center of their culture, their medicine, and their way of life. So what was it about this simple desert tree that made it so powerful? What did these ancient cultures know that we have completely forgotten? First, we need to talk about what makes this sugar a healing sugar. In our world, the word sugar is a bad word. We think of white sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and the diseases they cause, like diabetes and obesity. But mesquite is completely different. The sweetness in mesquite pods comes mainly from fructose, which your body processes without needing a big rush of insulin. This means it doesn't cause the dangerous blood sugar spikes that regular sugar does. In fact, mesquite has what is called a very low glycemic index. The glycemic index, or GI, is a number that tells you how quickly a food raises your blood sugar. Pure glucose is 100. White bread is around 75. Whole wheat flour is also around 75. Do you know what the glycemic index of mesquite flour is? It's 25. That is incredibly low. It is 3 times lower than wheat flour. This means it provides a slow, steady release of energy without the crash that comes from other sweets. This is where the story gets really interesting. The Pima people of Arizona, who traditionally ate a diet rich in mesquite, had almost no diabetes. But in the 20th century, their diet was forcibly changed. They were pushed away from their traditional foods and given government rations of white flour, sugar, and lard. And what happened? Today, the Pima have one of the highest rates of type 2 diabetes in the world. Scientists who have studied this believe that the loss of traditional foods like mesquite is a major reason for this health crisis. A study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that the slow digesting starches in their old diet helped protect them from diabetes. Mesquite was a key part of that protection. But the magic of mesquite doesn't stop there. It is also a powerhouse of nutrition. Those pods are packed with fiber. About 29% of mesquite flour is fiber, both the kind that dissolves in water and the kind that doesn't. This fiber is a prebiotic. That means it feeds the good bacteria in your gut. A healthy gut is the foundation of a healthy body. It helps you digest your food, strengthens your immune system, and even affects your mood. The fiber in mesquite helps these good bacteria thrive, which in turn helps reduce inflammation throughout your body. We now know that chronic inflammation is linked to almost every major disease of our time. And there's more. Mesquite seeds, which are tiny and very hard, are about 35% protein. When the whole pod is ground into flour, it becomes a high-protein food. It is also rich in minerals like calcium, magnesium, potassium, and iron. And it's naturally gluten-free. So you have a food that is a naturally sweet, low glycemic, high fiber, high protein, mineral-rich, gluten-free superfood. It sounds like something invented in a modern food lab, but it has been growing in the desert for thousands of years, free for anyone to gather. So if this plant is so perfect, why did we erase it? Why isn't mesquite flour in every grocery store? Why are we still growing fields of wheat and corn that need tons of water and chemicals when this miracle tree grows with almost no help at all? The answer is a sad story of progress that wasn't really progress at all. It is a story of how we came to value convenience and profit over health and sustainability. It started when the first European ranchers and settlers moved into the American West. They saw the vast desert grasslands, and they saw the mesquite trees as a nuisance. The trees got in the way of their cattle. They were hard to clear. So the ranchers tried to eradicate them. They set them on fire. They poisoned them with chemicals. They ripped them out of the ground with chains. They saw a weed, not the most important food source for the entire region. At the same time, the lives of the indigenous people were being turned upside down. Their lands were taken. They were forced onto reservations. Their children were sent to boarding schools, where they were forbidden from speaking their own language or practicing their own culture. And a huge part of that culture was the food. The U.S. government started providing food rations, and these rations were based on the European diet. White flour, white sugar, canned meat, and lard replaced the traditional foods like mesquite, acorns, and wild game. This new diet was a disaster for their health. Their bodies, which were perfectly adapted to the slow-release energy of foods like mesquite, were suddenly flooded with fast-digesting carbohydrates and unhealthy fats. The result was a public health crisis of diabetes and obesity that continues to this day. The healing sugar was replaced by a poison sugar, and the people suffered for it. But it wasn't just a cultural attack. The entire modern food system was built in a way that had no place for a food like mesquite. Our system is based on annual monocultures. That means huge fields of a single crop, like wheat or corn, that is planted and harvested every year. This system is efficient for machines, but it is terrible for the soil and for our health. Mesquite is a perennial tree. It lives for a very long time. It doesn't need to be planted every year. It has incredibly deep roots, some reaching down 160 feet into the earth to find water. This is why it can produce food even in the driest of years, with just a few inches of rain. It doesn't need irrigation from our dwindling rivers and aquifers. And because it is a legume, like a bean or a pea, it makes its own fertilizer. It takes nitrogen from the air and fixes it in the soil, making the ground more fertile for other plants around it. As one scientist I admire, Tim Cruz from the Land Institute, said, mesquite has a very high energy return on investment. You don't need to fertilize it. You don't need to add water. It pretty much grows itself. This is the exact opposite of our industrial food system, which is based on constant inputs of water, fertilizer, and pesticides. And most importantly, it is based on the annual purchase of seeds from giant corporations. A food that grows on a tree, for free, year after year, is a threat to that business model. There is no recurring profit in a food that takes care of itself. And so, mesquite was forgotten. It was labeled a poverty food or a starvation food. People were taught to be ashamed of eating it. They were told that modern processed foods from the grocery store were better. The knowledge of how to harvest it, how to grind it, and how to cook with it began to fade away. Today, most people who live in the Southwest see the mesquite pods on the ground as nothing more than trash to be swept up and thrown away. They have no idea that they are sweeping away one of the most perfect foods on the planet. But the story is not over. The knowledge was never completely lost. And now, a small but growing group of people are working to bring mesquite back. They are rediscovering its power and trying to remind us of what we forgot. And the best part is, you can be a part of this story. Using mesquite flour is easier than you might think. Because it is gluten-free, you can't use it to make a big, fluffy loaf of yeasted bread on its own. But you can substitute it for about a quarter to a third of the regular flour in almost any recipe. It adds a wonderful, slightly sweet, nutty, caramel-like flavor to pancakes, muffins, cookies, and quick breads. Its natural sweetness means you can often reduce the amount of other sugar in the recipe. You can buy mesquite flour online or in some health food stores. Yes, it is more expensive than wheat flour. Right now, it costs between $12 and $24 a pound. That is because there is no big industrial system for harvesting and processing it. It is mostly done by small producers and foragers. But the more people who start using it, the more the market will grow, and the more affordable it will become. I remember visiting a small farm in Arizona a few years ago. The farmer, an old man with hands as tough as leather, showed me how he harvested the pods. He didn't have any fancy machines. He just laid a tarp under a tree and shook the branches. The pods rained down. He told me, "You have to taste the pods from each tree. They are all different. Some are sweet like honey, some are bitter. You have to learn which trees are the good ones." It reminded me that food is supposed to be a relationship. It is about knowing the land and the plants around you. This is a knowledge that we have lost. We are used to every bag of flour being exactly the same. But with mesquite, every tree is an individual. It has its own unique flavor. This is a food that asks you to pay attention, to be a part of the process. Let me ask you something. Have you ever heard of mesquite as a food? Have you ever seen the pods on the ground and wondered what they were? It is amazing to think about how much wisdom is hidden in plain sight, all around us. Let me know in the comments if this is new to you, or if you have any experience with this incredible plant. I believe that bringing back foods like mesquite is not just about nostalgia. It is about our future. We live in a world that is getting hotter and drier. Our current food system is incredibly fragile. It depends on massive amounts of water, fossil fuels, and chemicals. It is not sustainable. We need to find new ways to feed ourselves, and sometimes the best new ideas are the very old ones. Mesquite is a food that is perfectly adapted to the challenges of our time. It thrives in the heat. It needs very little water. It enriches the soil. It is a food that can help us build a more resilient and sustainable food system. It is a food that can help us heal our bodies and heal the land. The story of mesquite is a powerful lesson. It teaches us that the most valuable things are not always the ones that are shiny and new. Sometimes they are the things that have been here all along, waiting patiently for us to notice them again. It teaches us that our ancestors were not primitive. They had a deep understanding of the world around them, a wisdom that we have traded for convenience. And it teaches us that we have a choice. We can continue to eat the processed, industrial food that is making us sick, or we can start to reclaim the forgotten foods that can make us strong. There is something else I want to share with you, something that makes mesquite even more special in these times. We are facing a climate crisis. The American Southwest, where mesquite grows, is getting hotter and drier every year. The Colorado River, which supplies water to millions of people and thousands of farms, is shrinking. Aquifers that took thousands of years to fill are being drained in decades. The way we grow food right now, with massive irrigation and chemical inputs, simply cannot continue. But mesquite doesn't care about drought. Its roots go so deep that it can find water that no other plant can reach. It can produce food in places where nothing else will grow. It can survive on just 3 inches of rain a year. In a world where water is becoming more precious than gold, this is a plant that offers real hope. It is a food source that works with the desert, not against it. I think about the generations that came before us. They lived in harmony with the land. They understood that the desert was not a wasteland, but a garden, if you knew how to read it. They knew which trees had the sweetest pods. They knew when to harvest. They knew how to store food for the lean times. This knowledge was passed down from grandparents to grandchildren for countless generations. And then, in just a few decades, it was almost wiped out. But not completely. There are elders who still remember. There are young people who are learning again. There are scientists and activists who are working to bring this food back. And there are people like you who are listening to this story and learning about something that was hidden from you. I want to tell you about one more thing. The taste. Because ultimately, food has to taste good, or we won't eat it. And mesquite tastes wonderful. It has a natural sweetness that is complex and satisfying. Some people describe it as tasting like caramel or molasses. Others taste hints of cinnamon or cocoa. Each tree is different, which is part of its charm. When you add mesquite flour to your baking, it gives a depth of flavor that you simply cannot get from regular flour. It makes your pancakes taste richer. It makes your cookies more interesting. It is a flavor that our ancestors loved, and I think you will love it too. The mesquite tree is patient. It has been waiting for us to come back to it. It has been producing its sweet pods every summer, whether anyone was there to gather them or not. It has been quietly improving the soil, fixing nitrogen, providing shade and shelter for desert animals. It has been doing its job, even when we forgot about it. Now it is our turn to remember, to look at the trees around us with new eyes, to see the food that is hiding in plain sight, to reconnect with a way of eating that is older than any empire, older than any written history, a way of eating that kept people healthy and strong for thousands of years. If this story has made you curious, I encourage you to seek out this healing sugar. Try it for yourself. Share this knowledge with others. The more of us who remember what was erased, the more power we have to build a better future for our food, for our health, and for our planet.